The scorching Nevada sun beat down on Zara Zimmerman's slender shoulders as she stood on the rickety porch of her late father's general store, watching a dust-covered stranger stumble down Hawthorne's Main Street. While others turned away, pretending not to notice the man's obvious distress, Zara's heart wouldn't allow her to do the same. "Heaven help us, another one," muttered Mrs. Holloway from behind her lace curtains across the street. "That girl's going to be the ruin of this town, mark my words." Zara ignored the whispers that followed her as she hurried down the steps, a canteen of fresh water in her hands. It was 1878, and Hawthorne, Nevada had seen its share of desperate folk passing through prospectors chasing silver dreams, drifters looking for work, families heading west with little more than hope. And while most townsfolk had grown callous to their plight, Zara remained steadfast in her belief that kindness cost nothing but meant everything. "Sir, please," she called, approaching the man cautiously. His clothes were tattered, his face weathered by sun and hardship. "Take some water. You look like you've had a difficult journey." The stranger's eyes, bloodshot and wary, darted to her face, then to the proffered canteen. With trembling hands, he accepted her offering. "Thank you, miss," he rasped after several deep gulps. "Been walking since dawn, got robbed 2 days back. Lost my horse, my money." "Come to my store," Zara said gently. "I can offer you some food and a place to rest for a while." Behind her, she heard the distinct scoffs of the town's more respectable citizens. Bernard Wallace, the banker, clicked his tongue in disapproval. Veronica Steele, who ran the town's only hotel, made no effort to lower her voice as she spoke to the milliner beside her. "There she goes again, inviting trouble right into her store. One day she'll get herself killed helping these vagrants." Zara straightened her spine and guided the grateful stranger toward Zimmerman General Goods, the business her father had built from nothing before pneumonia took him the previous winter. At 22, she was now the sole proprietor, and while business wasn't booming, she managed to keep the shelves stocked and the doors open. Inside the cool interior of the store, she set about preparing a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried beef for the traveler. "Miss, I ain't got nothing to pay you with," the man admitted, shame coloring his voice. "I'm not asking for payment," Zara replied, placing the food before him. "Just eat, regain your strength." The bell above the door jingled and Mayor Thompson entered, his round face pinched with irritation. Behind him trailed his wife, her expression equally disapproving. "Miss Zimmerman," the mayor began without preamble, "a word, if you please." Zara wiped her hands on her apron and followed him to a corner of the store, already bracing herself for the lecture to come. "This has got to stop," Mayor Thompson hissed, keeping his voice low enough that the stranger couldn't hear. "You're developing quite the reputation. Zimmerman's charity house, they're calling it. It's bad for business, yours and the town's." "With all due respect, Mayor," Zara replied evenly, "how I run my father's store is my concern. I'm not breaking any laws by offering food and water to those in need." "No, but you're inviting trouble. These drifters talk, more come. First, it's just a meal they want, then a job, then they're settling here with no prospects, becoming the town's burden. Or they might become valuable citizens," Zara countered, "like my father was when he first arrived here with nothing." Mrs. Thompson sniffed audibly. "Your father was a gentleman of means who had suffered temporary setbacks. These people are." She gestured vaguely toward the stranger, who was hungrily devouring the food Zara had provided. "Well, they're not the same caliber. I believe every person deserves dignity and basic kindness, Mrs. Thompson," Zara said firmly. "Now, unless you're here to make a purchase, I need to attend to my customer." The mayor's face flushed with anger. "Your father would be disappointed to see his hard work squandered on handouts, young lady. Mark my words, this misplaced charity will be your downfall." After the Thompsons departed, leaving the bell jangling violently in their wake, Zara returned to the stranger, who had finished his meal and was looking considerably revived. "I don't want to cause you no trouble, miss," he said, having overheard enough of the conversation to understand its nature. "You're not," Zara assured him, though in truth the mayor's words stung. Would her father disapprove of her actions? She didn't think so. Jacob Zimmerman had been a generous man, even if he'd been more discreet about it than she perhaps was. After the stranger departed, carrying a small parcel of food for his continued journey and directions to a nearby ranch that might need temporary workers, Zara set about reorganizing her inventory. The bell above the door chimed again, and she looked up, expecting another disapproving townsperson. Instead, a tall man filled the doorframe, silhouetted by the bright sunlight behind him. As he stepped into the store, Zara took in his appearance dusty trail clothes that nonetheless had a quality to them, a weathered cowboy hat pushed back to reveal dark hair, and eyes the color of a summer storm. He carried himself with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to wide open spaces, not crowded rooms. "Afternoon, madam," he said, removing his hat in a gesture that spoke of good upbringing. "Name's Daniel Everett. I'm looking for supplies before heading out to the Blackwater Ranch." "Blackwater Ranch," Zara repeated, surprised. "That's been abandoned for years, Mr. Everett." A smile played at the corners of his mouth, transforming his rugged features. "Not anymore. I bought it last month. Papers came through yesterday." Zara tried to hide her surprise. The Blackwater property was sizable 15 miles outside of town, with good grazing land and a reliable water source. It had once been one of the more prosperous ranches in the area before Old Man Blackwater died without an heir, leaving the place to fall into disrepair. "Well then, Mr. Everett, what supplies do you need?" she asked, slipping into her role as shopkeeper. "Quite a list," he admitted, producing a piece of paper from his pocket, "starting from scratch out there." As Zara moved around the store, gathering the items on his list: flour, coffee, nails, rope, tools, she felt his eyes following her, assessing but not in the uncomfortable way some men looked at a woman alone. "You run this place by yourself?" he asked as she measured coffee beans into a sack. "Since my father passed, yes," she answered. "It's not as difficult as people seem to think it should be." "I didn't say it would be difficult," Daniel replied, "just wondering if you had help. It's a big store for one person." "We're not exactly overrun with customers these days," Zara said, a touch of bitterness entering her voice before she could catch it. Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly. "Business slow? Let's just say I've made some unpopular decisions about how to run things." She didn't elaborate, focusing instead on tallying his purchases. Just then, the door opened again, and a small, bedraggled child of perhaps 7 or 8 years slipped inside. The girl's clothes were patched and faded, her face smudged with dirt, but her eyes were alert and wary. "Miss Zara," the child whispered, glancing nervously at Daniel. "Ma says to ask if you need any washing done. She's feeling better today." Zara's expression softened. "Hello, Lucy. Tell your mother I have some linens that could use washing. And take this." She reached under the counter and pulled out a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "It's a bit of that honey cake I made yesterday. Share it with your brothers." The girl's face lit up as she accepted the package, clutching it to her chest like treasure. "Thank you, Miss Zara. Ma will come by tomorrow for the washing." With that, she darted back out into the street, quick as a rabbit. When Zara turned back to Daniel Everett, she found him studying her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "The Turner family," she explained, though he hadn't asked. "Mr. Turner was killed in a mining accident last year. Mrs. Turner takes in washing when her health permits, but with 5 children to feed." "And you help them," he finished for her. "It wasn't a question." "I try to," she admitted. "Though apparently such assistance makes me the town pariah." She immediately regretted her candor. This man was a stranger, not someone to burden with town gossip. To her surprise, Daniel Everett didn't look judgmental. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "I've found that the opinions of others rarely align with what's right." After a pause, he asked, "Do you help many people in Hawthorne, Miss Zimmerman?" "Only those who need it," she replied cautiously. Before he could respond, the door burst open again, and Bernard Wallace strode in, his narrow face pinched with displeasure. "Zara," he said, not bothering with pleasantries, "I've just been informed that you're continuing to extend credit to the Miller family, despite my explicit warning that they're a poor financial risk." Zara straightened, aware of Daniel Everett's presence but unable to avoid the confrontation. Mr. Miller has been ill, Mr. Wallace. They have 3 young children. They've always paid their debts eventually. Eventually doesn't pay your suppliers, the banker snapped. And I notice you didn't deny it. This soft-heartedness will be your ruin, mark my words. Your father built this business through shrewd management, not by running a charity. My father taught me that a business succeeds by serving its community, Zara replied, keeping her voice level despite her rising anger. The Millers are part of this community. Wallace snorted derisively. The Millers are one missed payment away from becoming drifters themselves. And speaking of drifters, he cast a pointed look toward the back door through which the stranger from earlier had departed. I saw you feeding another one today. How many does that make this month? 5, 6. I wasn't counting, Zara said stiffly. Well, perhaps you should start counting the cost of your misguided generosity. This town has standards, Miss Zimmerman, standards your father understood. Daniel Everett cleared his throat, drawing the banker's attention for the first time. Pardon me for interrupting, he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made both Zara and Wallace turn to him. But I couldn't help overhearing. I believe a business owner has the right to manage their affairs as they see fit, particularly when it comes to extending credit to long-standing customers. Wallace's eyes narrowed. And you are Daniel Everett, new owner of the Blackwater Ranch. The banker's demeanor changed instantly, a smile replacing his scowl. Ah, Mr. Everett, I'd heard the property had sold. Welcome to Hawthorne. I'm Bernard Wallace, president of the First Bank of Hawthorne. I hope you'll consider us for your banking needs. I'll consider it, Daniel replied neutrally, though I tend to do business with people who share my values. Wallace's smile faltered slightly at the implication. Of course. Well, I'll leave you to your shopping. Do stop by the bank when you're in town next. We should discuss your financial options for developing that ranch. After the banker departed, an uncomfortable silence settled between Zara and Daniel. I apologize for that scene, she finally said, returning to the task of gathering his supplies. No need to apologize, Daniel replied. Seems to me you were handling it just fine. Zara laughed humorlessly. Mr. Wallace is just one of many who disapprove of how I conduct business. According to the good citizens of Hawthorne, I'm too generous with credit, too welcoming to strangers, and too concerned with the welfare of those who have fallen on hard times. Daniel studied her for a moment before saying, Sounds to me like you're exactly what this town needs, whether they know it or not. The simple statement, delivered without flattery or condescension, caught Zara off guard. She'd grown so accustomed to defending her choices that genuine approval left her momentarily speechless. That'll be $8.43, she said finally, indicating his pile of supplies. Daniel paid without haggling, then hesitated before picking up his purchases. Miss Zimmerman, I'm going to be needing regular supplies as I get the ranch operational. I'd like to set up an account here if that's agreeable. Of course, Zara replied, reaching for her ledger. And please call me Zara. Zara, he repeated, as though testing how the name felt. I'll be back in a week or so for the next load of supplies, and if you happen to know any reliable men looking for work, I'll be hiring soon. Ranch hands, a cook, maybe a foreman eventually. I might know a few, Zara said, thinking of several families struggling to make ends meet. Daniel gathered his purchases and settled his hat back on his head. Until next time, then. As he left, Zara found herself watching him longer than was strictly necessary, wondering about the man who had defended her to Bernard Wallace and who seemed unconcerned by her reputation for excessive kindness. The next week passed in a blur of routine, opening the store at dawn, serving the diminishing number of regular customers, closing after sunset, and repeating it all the next day. Zara tried not to notice how some townsfolk who once frequented her store now made the longer journey to the general store in Carson City, or how conversations sometimes halted when she approached. On Thursday, Lucy Turner's mother came to collect the washing, looking pale but determined. Miss Zimmerman, she said, her voice thin but proud, I want to thank you for the extra food you've been sending home with Lucy. It's made a difference, especially for the little ones. It's nothing, Mrs. Turner, Zara assured her. Those boys of yours are growing fast. They need proper nourishment. It's not nothing to us, the widow insisted, and I've heard talk around town, people saying unkind things about your generosity. I want you to know that not everyone feels that way, some of us. Her voice broke slightly. Some of us wouldn't survive without it. Zara squeezed the woman's work-roughened hand. Then the others can talk all they want, it changes nothing, after Mrs. Turner left with the payment for her washing more than the work was worth. Though Zara was careful to frame it as fair compensation rather than charity, Zara found herself contemplating the scales of her business ledger. The truth was, Wallace wasn't entirely wrong. Her generosity was affecting her bottom line. Not catastrophically, but enough that she'd had to dip into her personal savings twice in recent months. She was still pondering this when the bell above the door chimed and Daniel Everett walked in, looking more settled than he had a week prior. The layer of travel dust was gone, revealing clothes that, while practical for ranch work, were of good quality. "Miss Zimmerman," he greeted her, then corrected himself. "Zara." "Mr. Everett," she returned with a smile, "back for those supplies, among other things." He approached the counter, removing his hat. "I've started hiring. Took on 2 men yesterday, brothers named Hatch, who have been doing odd jobs around these parts. Good workers, from what I can tell so far." "The Hatch brothers are honest men," Zara confirmed. "Their farm failed after 3 seasons of drought, but it wasn't for lack of trying. That's good to know." Daniel leaned against the counter, his posture casual but his eyes intent. "I'm also looking for a cook and housekeeper. The ranch house is habitable, but only just. Needs a woman's touch, and I'm a disaster in the kitchen." "I might know someone," Zara said thoughtfully. "Widow Pearson. She's a fine cook, and since her husband died, she's been struggling to maintain their small farm on her own. Would she consider leaving it to work at Blackwater?" "She might, especially if the position included lodging. Her farm is mortgaged to the hilt, according to town gossip." Daniel nodded. "Lodging would definitely be part of the arrangement. Could you pass along word that I'm interested in speaking with her?" "Of course." Zara pulled out her order book. "Now, what supplies do you need today?" As she wrote down his list, Daniel watched her with that same thoughtful expression he'd worn during his last visit. "You know everyone's story, don't you?" he asked suddenly. Zara looked up, surprised. "Pardon?" "The Hatch brothers, Widow Pearson, the Turners, the Millers. You know their circumstances, their struggles. It's a small town," she said with a shrug. "People talk." "People always talk," Daniel agreed. "But not everyone listens the way you do. Not everyone remembers or cares." Before Zara could respond, the door opened again, and 3 women entered: Mrs. Thompson, the mayor's wife, Veronica Steele, the hotel proprietress, and Margaret Collins, who ran the town's small dress shop. They were the self-appointed arbiters of Hawthorne's social standards, and their expressions suggested they weren't there to shop. "Zara, dear," Mrs. Thompson began in a syrupy tone that set Zara's teeth on edge, "we need to speak with you about a matter of community concern." "I'm with a customer at the moment, Mrs. Thompson," Zara replied, gesturing to Daniel. The 3 women turned their attention to him, their expressions shifting from dismissive to interested as they took in his appearance. "You must be Mr. Everett," Veronica Steele said, stepping forward with an extended hand. "I'm Veronica Steele, owner of the Hawthorne Hotel. We're delighted to have you settling in our community." Daniel shook her hand briefly. "Madam." "We were actually hoping to speak with you as well, Mr. Everett," Mrs. Thompson interjected. "As a new business owner in our community, there are certain standards we try to maintain." Zara stiffened, already sensing where this conversation was heading. "What kind of standards?" Daniel asked, his tone neutral but his posture suddenly more alert. Margaret Collins cleared her throat delicately. "Hawthorne has always prided itself on being a respectable town. We're not like some of those rough mining settlements. We have churches, a school, proper businesses." "Sounds commendable," Daniel said, though his expression had grown guarded. "Yes, well," Mrs. Thompson continued, "part of maintaining that respectability is ensuring that our businesses cater to the right sort of clientele." "And which sort would that be?" Daniel asked, though Zara suspected he already knew the answer. Veronica Steele took over, her voice taking on a confidential tone. Mr. Everett, as you're establishing yourself here, you should know that some establishments in Hawthorne have developed rather unfortunate reputations. My hotel, for instance, caters exclusively to respectable travelers. The bank serves customers of good standing. Miss Collins's shop provides fashionable attire for ladies of quality. And Zimmerman General Goods, Daniel prompted when she paused. The three women exchanged glances. Zara is relatively new to running the business on her own, Mrs. Thompson said carefully. Her father was a respected merchant, but since his passing the store has become, well, a magnet for undesirables, Margaret Collins finished bluntly. Drifters, indigents, people who can't pay their bills. We've come to suggest, Veronica Steele added, that perhaps Miss Zimmerman might consider a different business model, one that aligns better with Hawthorne's values. I see, Daniel said, his voice deceptively calm. And you're including me in this conversation because, as a new business owner and landowner, Mrs. Thompson explained, you'll be needing supplies regularly. We wanted to ensure you were aware of the situation here before you committed to any ongoing business arrangements. Throughout this exchange, Zara had remained silent, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Now she stepped forward, her cheeks flushed with anger and humiliation. What Mrs. Thompson and her friends are trying to say, Mr. Everett, is that they don't approve of my policy of helping those in need. They believe I should turn away hungry people, refuse credit to struggling families, and generally behave as though profit is more important than human decency. Zara, Mrs. Thompson gasped. That is a gross mischaracterization, is it? Zara challenged. You've made your opinions perfectly clear repeatedly. You think I'm ruining my business and tarnishing the town's reputation because I occasionally provide a meal to someone who can't pay or extend credit to a family dealing with illness or hardship. It's more than occasionally, Margaret Collins countered. It's becoming well known throughout the territory that anyone down on their luck can get handouts at Zimmerman's. And is that such a terrible reputation to have? Daniel suddenly interjected, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. All four women turned to him in surprise. I beg your pardon, Mrs. Thompson said, clearly not expecting him to side against them. Daniel straightened to his full height, which was considerable. In my experience, madam, a person's character is best judged by how they treat those who can do nothing for them in return. By that measure, Miss Zimmerman appears to be a woman of exceptional character. The three older women stared at him, momentarily struck speechless. Mr. Everett, Veronica Steele finally managed, surely you understand the importance of maintaining certain standards. I understand the importance of human decency, Daniel interrupted, his tone polite but firm. And from what I've observed, Miss Zimmerman embodies that quality admirably. Well, Mrs. Thompson huffed, drawing herself up indignantly. I can see this conversation is not going to be productive. Come, ladies, we've said what needed to be said. As the three women departed, their heads close together in whispered consultation, an uncomfortable silence fell over the store. You didn't have to do that, Zara finally said, not meeting Daniel's eyes. They're influential in town. You've probably just made your life more difficult. I said what I believe, Daniel replied simply. And frankly, if those are the town's self-appointed moral guardians, I'm even more convinced you're doing exactly what needs doing. Zara looked up then, searching his face for any sign of mockery or condescension. Finding none, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders, the weight of constantly defending herself, of wondering if perhaps everyone else was right and she was foolish. Thank you, she said softly. Daniel nodded, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. I almost forgot. The real reason I came in today, besides supplies, I found this on my property. He handed her the paper, which Zara unfolded to reveal a crude map. What is this? She asked, studying the drawings. According to Old Man Jenkins at the livery, this might be a map to a silver deposit on Blackwater land, Daniel explained. Apparently, Josiah Blackwater was convinced there was silver on his property but died before he could prove it. Jenkins says this map was among Blackwater's effects, though how Jenkins ended up with it is a story involving whiskey and poker that I won't bore you with. And you're showing me because? Zara looked up, puzzled. Because I need supplies to do some exploratory digging, Daniel said. And because I thought you might be interested in a business opportunity if it pans out. Me, Zara blinked in surprise. You, Daniel confirmed. If there's silver there, I'll need investors to help develop it properly. Mining takes capital equipment, workers, infrastructure. Based on what I've seen of how you run your business, I'd rather partner with someone of your integrity than with, say, Bernard Wallace. Zara stared at him, stunned by the unexpected proposal. Mr. Everett, Daniel, you barely know me. I know enough, he replied. And call it a hunch, but I think we see the world in similar ways. He glanced toward the door where the three women had exited. Unlike some others in this town, Zara carefully refolded the map and handed it back to him. I'm flattered by your trust, but I don't have capital to invest. As you've probably gathered, my business practices aren't exactly focused on maximizing profits. Think about it, Daniel suggested, pocketing the map. It's just a possibility at this point anyway. I still need to verify if there's anything to find. He picked up his hat, preparing to leave. I'll come by tomorrow with a wagon for those supplies, if that's acceptable. Of course, Zara agreed, still somewhat dazed by the unexpected turn in their conversation. At the door, Daniel paused and turned back. You know, those women who were in here, they're wrong about you. Your kindness isn't a weakness or a business liability. From what I can see, it's your greatest power. With that, he tipped his hat and left, leaving Zara staring after him, a strange warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the summer heat. The following day, true to his word, Daniel returned with a wagon for the supplies Zara had assembled. He brought with him one of the Hatch brothers, a sturdy, quiet man who helped load the heavy items while Daniel and Zara finalized the bill. I spoke with Widow Pearson this morning, Zara informed him as she tallied the total. She's interested in the position but wanted to know more details: wages, specific duties, whether she'd have her own quarters. I can meet with her this afternoon if she's available, Daniel replied. The position would come with private accommodations. There's a small but decent room off the kitchen and fair wages. He named a figure that made Zara raise her eyebrows. That's very generous, Daniel shrugged. Good help is worth paying for, and from what you've said, she's experienced hardship. I don't believe in profiting from someone else's desperate circumstances. As he spoke, the bell above the door chimed, and a tall, thin man with a hard face entered. Zara recognized him as Leroy Watts, a cattle buyer who occasionally passed through town. He was known for driving hard bargains and had a reputation for being quick-tempered. Miss Zimmerman, Watts greeted her with a curt nod. Need some supplies before I head out. Got a herd to inspect over at the Carson property. Of course, Mr. Watts, Zara replied professionally. What can I get you? As she took his order, Watts's gaze shifted to Daniel, assessing him with the calculating look of a man who sized up everyone as either competition or opportunity. Don't believe we've met, he said, extending a hand. Leroy Watts. Daniel Everett, Daniel replied, shaking his hand briefly. Everett, you the fella who bought old Blackwater's place? That's right, Watts grunted. Tough land to make a go of it. Blackwater never could turn a consistent profit there. I've got some ideas, Daniel said noncommittally. While Zara gathered Watts's supplies, the cattle buyer continued to probe, asking about Daniel's background, his experience with ranching, and his plans for the property. Daniel answered politely but without revealing much, a fact that seemed to irritate Watts. You'll need to sell those cattle Blackwater left behind, Watts said eventually. Scrawny lot, but I might take them off your hands, save you the trouble of trying to improve the stock. I appreciate the offer, Daniel replied, but I've decided to keep them. With proper care and selective breeding, I believe they can be improved, Watts's expression soured. Waste of time and money, better to start fresh, perhaps, but I prefer to work with what I have. There was something in Daniel's tone that made Zara glance up from the shelf where she was selecting items. His voice was still courteous, but beneath it ran a current of steel that suggested the conversation was closed. Watts must have sensed it too, for he changed the subject abruptly. Heard there was some excitement in town yesterday, some drifter causing trouble at the saloon. I wouldn't know, Zara said, returning to the counter with Watts's supplies. I was here at the store. Probably another one of your charity cases gone wrong, Watts remarked with a smirk. Town's talking about how you feed every vagrant who wanders through. Not smart business, Miss Zimmerman, not smart at all. Zara felt her cheeks flush with anger, but before she could respond, Daniel spoke. Actually, Mr. Watts, I consider it excellent business sense. His tone was conversational, but his eyes had hardened. Miss Zimmerman understands something many merchants don't, that goodwill is a valuable commodity. People remember kindness, especially when it comes during hard times, Watts snorted. People take advantage is what they do. You're new here, Everett. You'll learn soon enough that Miss Bleeding Heart here is the exception, not the rule in how business gets done. Maybe that's why I prefer doing business with her, Daniel replied evenly. The tension in the air was palpable. Watts glared at Daniel for a long moment before turning back to Zara. How much do I owe you? He asked curtly. Zara named the amount, and Watts counted out the money, slapping it down on the counter with more force than necessary. Word of advice, Miss Zimmerman, he said as he gathered his purchases. Sentimentality is a luxury most businesses can't afford. Your father knew that. Shame you haven't figured it out yet. After he left, Zara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. I apologize for that, she said to Daniel. Mr. Watts has always been difficult. No need to apologize for him, Daniel replied, his expression softening as he looked at her. Though I'm starting to understand why you might be tired of defending your business practices. It does get wearing, Zara admitted. She hesitated, then added, but what you said about goodwill being valuable, that's exactly how my father viewed it. Despite what everyone seems to think, he wasn't some ruthless businessman. He believed in fairness and compassion. Sounds like a man I would have respected, Daniel said. I think he would have liked you, Zara replied, surprising herself with her candor. She quickly changed the subject. I'll tell Widow Pearson you can meet with her this afternoon. Shall I suggest she come to the ranch? That would be perfect. Say around 3 o'clock. Daniel paid his bill and helped his ranch hand finish loading the supplies. As they prepared to leave, he turned to Zara once more. I meant what I said yesterday, about your kindness being your power, not your weakness. Don't let people like Watts make you doubt that. For days after Daniel's visit, Zara found herself replaying their conversations in her mind. It had been so long since anyone had supported her choices rather than criticized them that his words felt like a cool drink after a long thirst. Widow Pearson accepted the position at Blackwater Ranch, stopping by the store on her way out of town to thank Zara for the recommendation. Mr. Everett seems a fair man, she told Zara. Offered me a good wage in my own quarters, just as you said. And he didn't bat an eye when I said I'd need to bring my cat along. I'm glad it worked out, Zara said sincerely. The ranch has been empty too long. He mentioned he has you to thank for recommending the Hatch brothers as well, the widow continued. Said you seem to have a knack for knowing who needs work and who'll do it well. Zara smiled modestly. I just pay attention, that's all. Over the next few weeks, Daniel became a regular visitor to the store, coming in for supplies and often lingering to talk with Zara when the store wasn't busy. She learned that he had grown up on a ranch in Texas, that he'd spent time mining in Colorado before deciding to return to ranching, and that he had no family to speak of beyond a distant cousin in San Francisco. What made you choose Hawthorne? She asked him one quiet afternoon as he helped her reorganize a shelf of canned goods that had become disorderly. Honestly, the price was right, he admitted with a chuckle. Blackwater's property had been on the market for years with no takers. The bank was willing to sell cheap just to get it off their books. But why Nevada at all? Why not go back to Texas? Daniel was quiet for a moment, his hands stilling on the cans he was arranging. Too many ghosts in Texas, he finally said. My parents' ranch was taken by the bank after a drought killed most of our cattle. My father died trying to save what was left of the herd during a wildfire. My mother followed a year later heart troubles, the doctor said, but I think it was grief that really took her. I'm sorry, Zara said softly, thinking of her own father and the emptiness his death had left in her life. It was a long time ago, Daniel replied, resuming his work on the shelf. But it taught me something important about the value of helping others through hard times. If someone had extended a bit of credit to my father or offered my mother some assistance after he died, he shook his head, might have made all the difference. The revelation explained so much about his support of her own charitable practices. Zara felt a new bond forming between them, a shared understanding of how quickly life could turn and how vital a helping hand could be in those moments. As summer gave way to fall, rumors began to circulate about activity at the Blackwater Ranch. Daniel had hired more men, not just ranch hands, but men with mining experience. Equipment was delivered. The Hatch brothers were seen in town purchasing picks, shovels, and other tools not typically used in cattle ranching. Bernard Wallace cornered Zara one morning as she opened the store. "What's Everett up to out there?" he demanded without preamble. "There's talk he's found something on that property." "You'd have to ask Mr. Everett," Zara replied evenly, though in truth, Daniel had kept her informed about his progress exploring the potential silver deposit. The initial findings were promising enough that he'd brought in men with mining experience to help with a more thorough investigation. "I'm asking you," Wallace pressed. "You two seem close." The insinuation in his tone made Zara bristle. "Mr. Everett is a valued customer and a friend," she said firmly. "Beyond that, his business affairs are his own concern, HMPH. Wallace's thin lips pressed into an even thinner line. "Well, if he's found silver on that property, he'll need financing to develop it properly. Make sure he knows the First Bank of Hawthorne is ready to discuss terms." After Wallace left, Zara couldn't help but smile at the irony. The same people who had criticized her connection to Daniel were now eager to curry favor with him based on rumors of silver. That afternoon, a commotion outside drew Zara to the store's front window. A crowd had gathered around a wagon parked in front of the assay office across the street. Daniel stood beside it, talking with the assayer and several townspeople who had congregated to see what was happening. Curious, Zara stepped outside just as Mayor Thompson arrived, puffing slightly from his hurried walk. "Mr. Everett," the mayor called. "Heard you might have found something interesting out at your place." Daniel turned, his expression carefully neutral. "Just having some samples assessed, Mayor. Nothing definitive yet." "Samples, eh?" The mayor peered into the wagon, which contained several burlap sacks and a wooden crate. "Mind if I ask what kind of samples?" "The kind that might contain silver," Daniel replied, drawing excited murmurs from the gathered crowd. "Or might not. That's what Mr. Peterson here is going to tell us." He nodded toward the assayer, who was already examining a piece of rock with interest. "Well, well," the mayor said, his tone suddenly obsequious. "This could be quite significant for Hawthorne, quite significant indeed. A new silver find would put us on the map, bring in investors, new businesses. If there's anything to find," Daniel cautioned, "let's not get ahead of ourselves." Despite his words, the excitement was palpable. Hawthorne had always existed on the periphery of Nevada's mining boom, close enough to benefit from some spillover traffic, but never experiencing the explosive growth of towns like Virginia City. The possibility of a silver strike on local land ignited immediate speculation and hope. As the crowd continued to grow, Daniel extricated himself and crossed the street to where Zara stood watching. "Quite a stir you're causing," she observed as he reached her. "Wasn't my intention," he replied. "Thought I'd be discreet, but news travels fast in small towns. Especially potentially profitable news." Zara nodded toward the mayor, who was now engaged in animated conversation with Bernard Wallace. "You'll have no shortage of people offering to help you develop your find if it proves out." "That's why I wanted to speak with you first," Daniel said, lowering his voice and guiding her back into the store, away from curious ears. "The initial samples look promising, very promising." Peterson's formal assessment will take a day or two, but he took one look at what I brought in and got excited. That's wonderful, Zara said sincerely. You must be thrilled. Cautiously optimistic, Daniel corrected. But if it is what I think it is, I want to revisit our conversation about a business partnership. Zara's eyebrows rose. You can't be serious. I told you I don't have capital to invest. You have something more valuable, Daniel insisted. Knowledge of this community and its people. If this deposit is substantial, it will mean jobs, lots of them. I'll need someone I trust to help me navigate who to hire, how to structure the operation, how to ensure it benefits the town rather than just extracting wealth. And you trust me to do that? Zara asked, genuinely surprised. More than anyone else in Hawthorne, Daniel confirmed. Your father's store has been the heart of this community for years. You know everyone's story, their needs, their capabilities. And despite what some people say, your approach to business, putting people before profit, is exactly the perspective I want involved in this venture. Zara was momentarily speechless. When she defended her business practices to the likes of Wallace and the Thompsons, she'd never imagined someone would actually see value in them, let alone want to incorporate them into a potentially lucrative mining operation. I'm honored by your confidence, she finally managed. But I don't know the first thing about mining. You don't need to, Daniel said. I've got mining experience from my time in Colorado. What I need is someone who understands this community and shares my vision for how this opportunity should benefit more than just the investors. Before Zara could respond, the bell above the door jingled and Bernard Wallace entered, followed closely by Mayor Thompson. Everett, Wallace exclaimed, as though surprised to find him there, though he'd clearly seen Daniel enter the store. Just the man we wanted to see. Thompson and I have been discussing your potential find, and we'd like to offer our expertise and resources. Is that so? Daniel's tone was polite but non-committal. Absolutely, the mayor enthused. The First Bank of Hawthorne is prepared to discuss very favorable terms for any financing you might need. And of course, as mayor, I can help smooth the way for any permits or approvals. That's very kind, Daniel replied. But it's premature to discuss such arrangements until the assay results are confirmed. Of course, Wallace agreed readily, but it never hurts to be prepared. Perhaps we could discuss possibilities over dinner this evening. My wife would be delighted to host you at our home. Daniel glanced at Zara, a silent communication passing between them. Thank you for the invitation, but I've already made plans for this evening. Oh, Wallace looked momentarily disappointed. Well, perhaps tomorrow then. I'll let you know when I'm ready to discuss business arrangements, Daniel said firmly. For now, I'm focusing on confirming whether there's anything worth discussing. After Wallace and the mayor departed, clearly disappointed by their failure to secure an immediate commitment, Daniel turned back to Zara. I meant what I said, he told her. I want you involved in this venture if it materializes. Why? Zara asked, still not fully understanding his insistence. There are people in town with more business experience, more connections, more resources, but none with your integrity, Daniel interrupted. Or your genuine concern for people's welfare. That's what I want as part of this endeavor. Their eyes met, and Zara felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with business propositions. Daniel's gaze held genuine admiration, and something that made her heart beat faster and her cheeks flush. Think about it, he said softly. That's all I ask. That evening, long after she'd closed the store, Zara sat at the small desk in her living quarters above the shop, reviewing her ledger. The entries told a story beyond simple debits and credits. They chronicled a community's struggles and her attempts to alleviate them. Extended credit to the Millers during Mr. Miller's illness. A discount, really a partial gift, on winter boots for the Turner children. Supplies provided to a family passing through whose wagon had broken down, leaving them stranded without funds. Each entry represented a choice to prioritize compassion over profit. Her father had taught her that a business ledger was more than a financial record, it was a moral one as well, documenting the kind of person you chose to be when faced with others' hardship. A knock at the store's back door startled her from her reflections. Cautiously, she made her way downstairs and called through the door. "Who is it?" "Daniel Everett," came the reply. Surprised, Zara unbolted the door to find Daniel standing there, holding a small wooden box. "I apologize for the late hour," he said, "but I wanted you to be the first to know." "Know what?" Zara asked, stepping back to allow him inside. In answer, Daniel placed the box on the counter and opened it, revealing several chunks of rock embedded with gleaming metallic veins. "Peterson completed his preliminary assessment," Daniel explained, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "It's silver, all right, high-grade ore, better quality than most of what's been found in the region." "Daniel, that's wonderful," Zara exclaimed, genuinely happy for him. "There's more," he continued. "Based on our exploratory digging and Peterson's assessment of the samples from different locations, this isn't just a small pocket. It appears to be a substantial vein, potentially extending throughout a significant portion of the property." The implications were enormous. If the deposit was as substantial as Daniel believed, it could transform not just his fortunes but potentially the entire town's economy. "You're going to be a very wealthy man," Zara said softly. "Maybe," Daniel acknowledged. "But that's not why I came here tonight." He took a deep breath as though steeling himself for something. "Zara, I need to be honest with you about something." Confused by his sudden, serious tone, Zara felt a flicker of apprehension. "What is it?" "When I first came to Hawthorne, buying the Blackwater property was a business decision. I'd heard rumors about the possible silver deposit, and I wanted to investigate without drawing attention. The ranch was a good cover, a legitimate business that would explain my presence while I explored the property." "I see," Zara said carefully, uncertain where this confession was leading. "But then I met you," Daniel continued, his eyes holding hers, "and everything changed. What started as a straightforward business venture became something more complicated, because I found myself caring more about your good opinion than about potential silver deposits." Zara's breath caught in her throat. "Daniel, let me finish," he said gently. "You've been mocked for your kindness to strangers, including me when I first arrived. But your kindness, your compassion, your unwavering belief that people deserve dignity and basic decency, those qualities are extraordinary, Zara. They're your greatest power. And they've made me see this opportunity in a completely different light." He gestured to the silver-laden rocks. "This find could be developed the way most mining operations are, extracting maximum profit with little regard for the community or the workers. But that's not what I want. I want to create something different, something that reflects the values I've come to admire in you." Zara was momentarily speechless, overwhelmed by both his revelation about the silver and the personal nature of his declaration. "I still don't understand what role you see for me in all this," she finally said. "I'm a shopkeeper, not a mining expert or a business magnate. You're the conscience I want guiding this enterprise," Daniel replied simply. "The voice that will remind us that profit isn't the only measure of success. The perspective that will ensure we use this opportunity to lift people up, not exploit them." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded document. "I've drawn up a partnership agreement. Equal shares in the mining operation, with provisions for how decisions will be made and profits distributed. I'd like you to read it, consider it, and if you're willing, join me in this venture." Zara accepted the document with trembling hands, still trying to process everything he was saying. "This is overwhelming, I know," Daniel acknowledged. "And there's one more thing I need to say, something that has nothing to do with silver or business partnerships." His expression softened, vulnerability replacing the excitement of moments before. "I didn't plan on feeling this way, Zara. When I came to Hawthorne, the last thing I expected was to meet someone who would change how I see the world. But you have. Your courage in standing by your convictions despite criticism, your genuine concern for others, your quiet strength, they've all made me realize that I've found something far more valuable than silver." Zara's heart pounded as she began to understand what he was saying. "I'm falling in love with you," Daniel said simply. "And that's perhaps the most unexpected and wonderful discovery I've made since coming to Hawthorne. The declaration hung in the air between them, more precious than the silver samples on the counter. Zara felt as though she was standing on the edge of a precipice, with everything about to change depending on her next words. "I think," she said carefully, finding her voice at last, "that I'm falling in love with you too." The smile that broke across Daniel's face was like sunrise after a long night. He reached for her hands, holding them gently in his own. "Then, Miss Zimmerman, would you do me the honor of considering two proposals, one business, one personal?" "I believe I would, Mr. Everett," Zara replied, her own smile mirroring his. The following months transformed Hawthorne in ways no one could have predicted. The confirmation of a major silver deposit on the Blackwater property set off a flurry of activity that rippled throughout the community. True to his word, Daniel structured the mining operation unlike most others in the territory. Workers were paid fair wages and provided with decent housing. Safety measures exceeded the minimal standards common in most mines. Families were welcomed, with provisions made for schooling and medical care. And at the center of it all was Zara, whose insistence on treating people with dignity and respect became the cornerstone of the enterprise's philosophy. The same qualities that had once made her the target of mockery now earned her respect as townsfolk witnessed how her approach created not just profit, but prosperity that benefited the entire community. Bernard Wallace was initially furious when he learned that Daniel had chosen to partner with Zara rather than seek financing through his bank. His anger turned to grudging acceptance when the Everett Zimmerman Mining Company chose to deposit its substantial proceeds in his institution, significantly expanding the bank's resources and stability. The mayor, ever the political weathervane, quickly became one of the operation's most vocal supporters, claiming he had always seen the potential in Miss Zimmerman's unique business approach. Mrs. Thompson and her social circle, initially scandalized that Daniel had chosen Zara as both business partner and romantic interest, gradually adjusted their position as the couple's success and popularity grew. 6 months after the discovery of silver, Daniel and Zara were married in a ceremony that united the entire town in celebration. The guest list included everyone from the wealthiest merchants to the poorest laborers, a reflection of the couple's belief that every person deserved recognition and respect. As they stood together greeting their guests at the reception held in the town square, Leroy Watts approached, hat in hand. "Miss Zimmerman, Mrs. Everett, I should say I owe you an apology," he said, uncharacteristic humility in his voice. "I was wrong about your business practices. What I called sentimentality was actually good sense. You saw a value in people that the rest of us missed." "Thank you, Mr. Watts," Zara replied graciously. "Though I can't take credit for good sense, I simply did what I believed was right." "And that turned out to be the smartest business move of all," Daniel added, his arm protectively around his new wife's waist. Later, as twilight settled over the celebration, Daniel led Zara away from the crowds for a moment of privacy. "Happy?" he asked, studying her face in the soft glow of the lanterns strung throughout the square. "More than I ever imagined possible," Zara replied truthfully. "Though it still seems like a dream sometimes. This time last year I was the town pariah for feeding drifters. Now you're showing everyone that kindness isn't just the right choice morally, it's powerful," Daniel completed her thought. "It changes lives, it transformed mine." "Ours," Zara corrected, reaching up to touch his face gently. "Our lives." Daniel smiled, leaning down to kiss her. "I told you from the beginning," he murmured against her lips, "your kindness is your greatest power." 1 year to the day after their wedding, Zara stood on the porch of their home, a beautiful but not ostentatious house built on a rise overlooking both the ranch and the mining operation. In her arms was their infant son, Jacob Daniel Everett, named for the grandfather he would never meet but whose values lived on in his mother. Daniel rode up from the direction of the mine, dismounting with the easy grace that still made Zara's heart skip a beat. As he climbed the steps to join his family, his face broke into the warm smile reserved only for them. "How are my two favorite people today?" he asked, kissing Zara before gently taking their son into his arms. "We're wonderful," Zara replied, watching as the baby grabbed at his father's finger with a determined grip. "Even more so now that you're home." "Good news from town," Daniel told her as they settled onto the porch swing. "The school construction is ahead of schedule. It should be ready before winter sets in." The new school was one of many community improvements funded by the Zimmerman Foundation, established with a portion of the mining profits specifically to benefit Hawthorne and its residents. Other projects included a proper hospital, a library, and a fund to help struggling families weather hard times without falling into destitution. "And how is Mrs. Turner enjoying her new position?" Zara asked. The widow had recently been appointed as the foundation's administrator, responsible for identifying needs within the community and directing resources appropriately. "Thriving," Daniel reported. "She has a natural talent for organization and a genuine understanding of what families need to succeed. Lucy's helping her after school, learning the business. That girl has a head for numbers that would put most bankers to shame." Zara smiled, remembering the thin, wary child who had once come to her store asking if her mother could do washing. Now Lucy Turner was a confident young woman with prospects far beyond what anyone might have imagined possible a few years earlier. "I received a letter from Widow Pearson today," Zara said. "She's settling well into her retirement cottage." The former housekeeper had recently decided to step back from full-time work, moving into one of several comfortable cottages built specifically for aging workers who had served the ranch or mine. "I'm glad to hear it," Daniel replied. "She deserves a peaceful retirement after all her hard work." He gazed out over the property, the mining operation visible in the distance alongside grazing cattle, a unique combination that symbolized their diverse enterprises. "Sometimes I still can't believe how all of this came together." "From a map found in a poker game to all of this," Zara agreed with a gentle laugh, "it does seem rather improbable." "Not the silver," Daniel clarified, looking back at her with an intensity that still made her breath catch. "Us. How finding you changed everything about what I thought I wanted. How your kindness showed me a different way to measure success." Zara leaned against his shoulder, their son now sleeping peacefully in his father's strong arms. "I think about that day you first came into the store," she mused. "Right after I'd helped that dusty stranger and endured another lecture from the mayor. I was beginning to wonder if everyone else was right, if my father's approach to business really was outdated and foolish. And then I appeared, equally dusty but considerably more charming," Daniel teased. "And considerably more supportive," Zara added. "You were the first person in a long time who didn't mock me for helping others, who understood why it mattered." "Because I'd seen the other side," Daniel said, his voice growing serious. "I'd seen what happens when profit is the only consideration, when people are treated as expendable. My parents learned that lesson the hard way." He looked down at their sleeping son. "He'll never have to learn it. He'll grow up knowing that his worth isn't measured by what he owns or earns, but by how he treats others. By the kindness he shows, especially to those who can give nothing in return." "That's the legacy I want to leave him," Zara agreed softly. "More than silver mines or successful businesses. The understanding that kindness is never wasted, even when it seems that way." As the sun began to set over the Nevada landscape, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Daniel shifted to face his wife more directly. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when I told you that day that your kindness was your greatest power, I believed it. But I had no idea just how powerful it would prove to be, how it would transform not just my life, but an entire community." "It wasn't just me," Zara protested modestly. "You were the one who found the silver, who had the vision for how to develop it differently." "A vision inspired by you," Daniel countered. "By watching how you ran your store, how you treated people, how you refused to abandon your principles even when it cost you." He shook his head in wonder. "Who would have thought that the business practices that made you the target of gossip would become the foundation for all this success?" "Not Bernard Wallace, certainly," Zara said with a mischievous smile. thinking of the banker who now regularly sought their advice on community investments. "Definitely not Mrs. Thompson and her sewing circle of doom," Daniel agreed, making Zara laugh out loud. Their son stirred at the sound, his tiny face scrunching before relaxing back into sleep. Both parents watched him with identical expressions of adoration. "5 years ago, I never would have imagined this life," Zara confessed after a moment. "Running my father's store alone, trying to hold on to his values while everyone told me I was foolish, I thought that was my future. Lonely, difficult, constantly swimming against the current. And now—" Daniel prompted gently. Zara looked around at their home, at the thriving enterprises visible in the distance, at the husband and child beside her. "Now, I understand that holding on to those values wasn't just the right thing to do morally. It was leading me exactly where I needed to go, even when I couldn't see it." She reached over to clasp Daniel's free hand in hers. "To you, to this, to a life where kindness isn't mocked but multiplied." Daniel brought her hand to his lips. "From the moment I met you, I knew you were different. Special, not because you were beautiful, though you certainly are, but because you had the courage to stand by your convictions when it would have been easier to conform." "It wasn't always courage," Zara admitted. "Sometimes it was just stubbornness." "Tomato, tomato," Daniel replied with a wink, making her smile. His expression grew more serious as he added, "But whatever you call it, it changed everything for me, for this town, for countless people who have benefited from the way we've structured our businesses." As if to underscore his point, in the distance, they could see workers emerging from the mine at the end of their shift, walking toward the comfortable housing built specifically for them and their families. Unlike most mining operations, where workers lived in squalid conditions and were often trapped in debt to the company store, the Everett Zimmerman employees enjoyed fair treatment, decent wages, and the dignity that came with being valued as people, not just labor. "I think my father would be proud," Zara said softly, watching the scene. "Not of the success or the silver, but of how we've used it." "I know he would," Daniel assured her. "From everything you've told me about him, he understood what truly matters." Their peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats approaching. A rider appeared on the path leading to their home, and as he drew closer, Zara recognized Ted Hatch, one of the brothers who had been among Daniel's first hires. "Mr. Everett, Mrs. Everett," Ted called, reining in his horse at the foot of the porch steps. "Sorry to disturb you at home, but there's news from town. A family's just arrived, lost everything in a fire at their homestead about 50 miles east. They've got 3 young children and nowhere to go." Zara and Daniel exchanged a glance, a world of understanding passing between them without words. "Tell them we have a place for them at the worker housing until they get back on their feet," Daniel instructed. "Make sure they have food, clothing, whatever they need, and let Mrs. Turner know she can help determine what other assistance they might require." "Yes, sir," Ted replied with a nod. "Mrs. Turner's already taken them under her wing, says the father has carpentry experience. We can certainly use a good carpenter," Zara noted. "The new library shelves need building, and there's always work around the ranch and mine." "Let him know there's work available when he's ready," Daniel added, "but give the family time to settle in first." After Ted rode off to deliver their message, Zara turned to Daniel with a smile. "Some things don't change," she observed. 5 years ago, I would have offered that family food and shelter in my store, and the mayor would have lectured me about inviting trouble. And now we can offer them not just immediate help, but a real chance to rebuild their lives," Daniel completed the thought. "That's the difference your approach has made. Kindness isn't just a momentary comfort, it's the foundation for lasting change." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, their sleeping son cradled between them, watching as the stars emerged one by one in the vast Nevada sky. Neither felt the need to speak, comfortable in the silence that comes with complete understanding. They had created something rare and precious, not just wealth, though they had that in abundance, but a legacy of compassion that would outlast any silver deposit. A demonstration that success and kindness weren't opposing forces but complementary ones, each enriching the other. In a town that had once mocked Zara for her generosity to strangers, they had proven that such kindness wasn't weakness but strength. That helping others didn't diminish one's own prospects but expanded them in ways no one could have predicted. And as they finally rose to carry their son inside, Zara paused to look back at the peaceful landscape spread out before them, at the community they had helped to transform, at the lives made better through their shared vision. "You were right, she said softly to her husband. "That day in the store when you defended me to those women, when you said my kindness was my greatest power." Daniel smiled, the love in his eyes visible even in the gathering darkness. "I usually am right," he teased, "but especially about that." Together they entered their home, carrying with them not just their sleeping child but the quiet certainty that they had discovered life's most profound truth. That in a world often defined by what one can take, the greatest power lies in what one chooses to give.